Welcome to Startup Simplified, Yann. How are you?
Very well. Great to be here.
Awesome. So you've come directly from the ASEAN Summit today.
Yeah, that's right.
How was it?
It was great. Meeting a lot of very important people, feeling nice and inspired.
Okay.
Lots of diversity. It was really good to see.
Awesome. How long you been in Jakarta?
Actually, not that long. About 8 months or so now. I spent quite a bit of time here in my prior life.
Sure.
It was in corporate, but living here, spending time, really being in the market, just about 8 months.
Where do you live in Jakarta?
In Baskit.
Nice. How are you finding the place so far?
I love Jakarta. I absolutely love it. I've been in Asia for almost 10 years now.
Sure.
Done the usual rounds, Singapore, Hong Kong, Shanghai, a bunch of places.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to say that Jakarta is the place that reminds me of home the most.
And where is home?
So I'm Brazilian.
Oh, you're Brazilian.
I'm
Okay.
Brazilian, and Jakarta and São Paulo are like sister cities, in many ways.
Okay. And then never heard this before. Why do you say so?
Big city, lots of traffic, lots of chaos. Yeah, you have the added element of Brazil being dangerous, but
Sure.
generally the chaos is there, that positive chaos, right?
Sure.
So I think they're very similar. And they're both the economic peaks of the entire area, right? So as soon as you leave the city, you have this stark difference. You have pockets of wealth, just like you have in Bandung, for instance.
Sure.
Then you have in cities in the state of São Paulo. But beyond that, it very quickly goes rural. And that reminds me of home a lot. Not even to go down the route of talking about culture and everything, because again, being here reminds me of home from a welcoming, just how people like to live their lives. People are generally a little bit more chill.
Sure.
And some of the Western counterpart countries, right?
Yeah.
So that reminds me of home too.
Sweet. So how did you move to Asia? I mean, just walk us through your journey. So you grew up in Brazil and then you moved to Asia. What was this whole transition like?
So I don't say where my other half is from because it's not as cool as Brazil, but I'm actually half Belgian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And weirdly enough, nothing to do with my nationality itself, but when I was young, my father's work involved moving to Belgium.
Okay.
He was opening up a port in Antwerp, and it just turned out that my entire life I kept bouncing back and forth between Brazil and Belgium every 2-3 years. So it was Brazil, Belgium, Brazil, Germany, then Belgium.
Okay.
And then it was time to go to uni, went to the UK. So I kind of felt that I had enough about continents. I was like, okay, Europe and LATAM is great. US was great, but I wasn't going to pay for university there. So I thought, you know what, let me get a quick education in the UK and let me go open up a new frontier.
Sure.
So the first opportunity that I had to work for a respected company, a company that would teach me things that I wanted to learn and would open doors for that, I took it. And that happened to be one of the world's largest FMCG companies that offered me a role in Shanghai at the time. So this was, roughly 8-9 years ago.
Which company was this?
AB InBev.
Woof.
So
Okay.
the large brewer from 3G Capital.
Yeah. As large as they get.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
And that was a lot of fun. Look, it was during the heydays of China, digitization, Alibaba, Tencent, biggest consumer market in the world. And I was thinking, wow, this is fantastic. So I moved out there. And that was the beginning of my APAC chapter. They offered me opportunities to spend time in India, across Southeast Asia, a lot of work in Southeast Asia. They sent me to Hong Kong for a couple of years to manage the markets there.
Sure.
And that bit by bit kind of tipped the dominoes that brought me to Indonesia, where at least the center of my world is today.
Interesting. So I was recording a podcast recently with a very good friend and a founder. His name is Jimmy. So he operates Kita Lulus, and he was interviewing me, and he asked me this question, which I'm going to ask you. The question is that what goes wrong with people that they quit everything beautiful in life and want to struggle being an entrepreneur? So is there something in the central circuitry which just goes off? So what happened with you?
Yeah, look, I like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Maybe I got choked out too hard one day and something went loose. But jokes aside, I think people mature in different ways, in different aspects of their life mature. And And I think it is a matter of how that maturity is progressing, but also life circumstance. The realization for me that I should quit and I should drive something new, that I should really go out on a limb and prove a point, really drive something that I believe in. It came at a time where I wasn't super young anymore. I had, 10 years experience or so. I had financial resources. I had that comfort and that safety net. I felt that I also had the knowledge and the ability to connect enough dots to really, have the horsepower to be able to do something. But it was that combination with a few other things, me not having kids, having a super supportive wife who said, you know what, let's just do this. This is going to be great. Let's go and try it out. And the third thing, a moment of being disillusioned by what a linear thread brings to you. I was very focused on becoming CEO of AB InBev. I wanted that at all costs. I knew that since I was 14.
14?
Yeah, since I was 14. It's a Brazilian-Belgian company. I'm a Brazilian-Belgian. Since I was 14, I was like, this is what I want. And all the way through to the day that disillusionment happened, I was 100% convinced of it. And what brought about it, it's not necessarily that I was upset with the company or anything like this. It's this understanding that it doesn't matter how much your execution can be perfect and how everything that you do lines up perfectly. There are exogenous factors which make several components of your future be outside of your span of control. And I wasn't ready to accept that. I'd rather take this experience, the freedom, the support, and add that, okay, now it's in my own hands to make it happen. When all those factors were aligned, that's one for me was just a no-brainer. There was absolutely no way that I was going to continue in a thread that wasn't going to allow me to have that control.
Sounds good. I mean, look, the freedom which comes along with entrepreneurship is definitely something which is very, very addictive and very appreciative as well. And you can only appreciate it once you taste it. I agree completely. But having said this, when you haven't done it, you're a first-time founder, right? This is your again, I'm talking from my experience. Please correct me, right? I mean, if you haven't done it before, you really don't know what does this feel like. And then there's this massive cushion all around, right? The safety nets, the usual safety nets, the monthly massive dopamine drug dose of salary, which comes in. And then taking a step like this, venturing into entrepreneurship, generally what I've seen is that it's either idea driven, that an entrepreneur has an idea and the idea is that strong enough that it is the itch is real itch out there that, hey, listen, I want to do this, right? Or there is an individual who's like, okay, I am done with all these corporate shenanigans and I want to do things on my own, right? I want to become an entrepreneur and now I'm going to decide what I want to do. What was it for you? Was it a mix of both or was it one?
I think if I could perhaps, just add on to that idea, I would say it's rather a spectrum than a binary black and white, right?
Okay.
Because in my case, I had the name Baskit, the name of my company. I had named Baskit in mind since 2017.
Okay.
I knew that the ideas that I had, the insights that I was gathering about supply chains, I wanted to do something in that space. And I was fantasizing about building a company. But at the same time, I had this, perhaps at the time naive, but, later I realized that, I'm not so naive, feeling that I could perhaps do it internally. I could steer the company, could steer a massive tanker ship with 300,000 people in it in the direction where we could execute those things. And part of the disillusionment, the losing that perspective that, look, this can be done internally was one of the bigger trigger for me. Because I had the idea, I knew that I was super passionate about that, and I knew that it could be so transformative for the company. It just took me 6 years to get to the point where I said, actually, I just need to change the game I'm playing.
Let's do it.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then, but the idea was always there. It was always a driver.
Sure. So yeah, then it's a perfect mix of things, right? Of course, it's not binary. I agree completely. But even with even with the definition which I was giving, it was a perfect mix of it.
Correct.
Right? Nice. Okay, so let's talk about Baskit.
Sure.
Right. So just to give an idea to me as well as the viewers, right, in the simplest terms possible, what exactly you guys are doing?
We help middlemen in supply chains.
Okay. How?
So middlemen are kind of the ugly ducklings of the supply chain. No positive emotions are evoked when you speak of a middleman.
I mean, historically, in any business, no one really respects. It's unfortunate, to be honest. No one really respects middlemen. I mean, they're always attributed onto the long end of things, but they do help to keep the system running.
Correct.
Definitely. How do you help them?
Yeah, so perhaps on how I help them, let me explain the importance of the middleman in the supply chain.
Sure.
So you talk about middlemen in the context of the United States.
Okay.
So let's talk about the wholesaler system, the distributor and wholesaler system in the United States.
Okay.
The government thought it was so important to modernize them that they created government-mandated tierings for wholesalers, whereby manufacturers have to go through layers and layers of these wholesalers. Why?
Okay.
Because these wholesalers are going to put together the infrastructure. They're going to hire thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. They are connected to their local communities. They're literally like the hubs of, supply chain within their area.
Sure.
So companies like Amazon and whatnot are a threat to that. But in some ways, they are so important that the government institutionalized intermediary support. In markets like, in any emerging market for that matter, but in Indonesia, it's a particularly market example of this. In supply chains, especially in more traditional supply chains, consumer goods, spare parts, anything of that type, the fragmentation is just humongous. You're talking about north of 80% of products sold by manufacturers depending on an intricate and super chaotic and convoluted chain of intermediaries. Those intermediaries are, run by aunties and uncles that have been doing it for 50, 60 years, sometimes more. Generational. Their kids go to school with the kids of the owners of the shops. They're super ingrained in their local communities. Now, if you put that into numbers in Indonesia, it's between 100 to 200,000 wholesalers, depending on how you define that. Whether it's
pretty sizable number.
Very sizable, $200 billion, right? It's absolutely massive. Startups, when they think about supporting the supply chain, usually has something to do with removing those layers.
I was about to come to that, but yeah.
Why?
Yeah, why? I've always been curious why, and they've been trying it for a while, and I don't think anyone, at least in the region, has been successful, apart from the online behemoths to some extent. Yeah. But why do you think? Why?
We can touch on that later. I think the music hasn't fully stopped in some areas.
Correct.
The game is still playing out.
Yeah.
But the reason why disintermediation is such an attractive proposition is because it's very clear mathematics. Here's the margin pool. Here are the steps. If I take this out and I take this out and I internalize it, magical. I've pocketed this and I think I can do more efficiently to get to the end buyer. Now that sounds beautiful on an Excel spreadsheet or a McKinsey, BCG, Bain, PowerPoint. But when it comes out of the drawing board and it actually goes into practice where you have complex human relationships, you have these intergenerational sticky businesses that sure are not very sophisticated and sure are, in some ways not very prone to adopting technology. It is just extremely difficult for you to want to do that. And even if you're able to do that, the powers that be at the supply chains, the big brands, the big manufacturers, they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want somebody coming in there and saying, hey, let me kick out a bunch of these guys. Eventually, it becomes a problem.
Sure.
It turns the ecosystem upside down and it creates all sorts of issues. So historically, what we've seen is that startups that try to disrupt too much, they get sidelined by the upstream.
Sure.
Or they struggle so much in that disintermediation process that it becomes an overly expensive venture in the long term.
I mean, we've seen this fold out very badly in India as well. There have been a bunch of startups. I mean, there are a lot of experimentations that happen in India, which has been gradually been replicated in Indonesia as well. be it in terms of, again, removing these middlemen and going directly, becoming that distributor, which is a centralized distributor of sorts, again, playing on the margins. But even there, it has failed to a large extent because the retailer still has those deep relationships with these middlemen, which have been formed over decades.
Yeah.
And they just don't care about that incremental benefit which you are giving as a platform. They're like, no, I mean, this is too important. We'll stick to this. But yeah, okay.
There are more things.
Yeah, okay.
And this is a very interesting point. And I think this is actually, it spreads across broader venture than just supply chains.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest missteps that startups make is they fail to understand that there are costs that they are assuming as part of their business model that were not costs before. So
give me an example.
So that calculation, I said, if I pocket this margin and this margin and I do more efficiently, then I can grab this margin. What is being underappreciated here is that this guy is literally paying, sharing a motorist with 7 other intermediaries.
Yep.
That is their like cousin, not even sure if it's his working age, right?
Correct.
Secondly, these guys have how many books? They have 3 different books and they're managing taxes very wisely. Third, a lot of the purchasing, it's called supply chain because it's supply driven. It gets to a final node of distribution and then a lot of times the demand comes to it. So a lot of the retailers actually pick up from some of these intermediaries.
Sure.
And that dynamic is seen all over the world with the cash and carries. Now, if we build a startup and we say, we're just going to do the deliveries. How much more costs have you now eaten up as a result of you saying, I'm going to do this because I've mapped it and this is how the supply chain works. So net, you're actually being much less efficient than what an intermediary would have been by virtue of the costs that you have to put on yourself as an official company that pays taxes, that is basically providing the full end-to-end service.
Do you think these are cases of having lazy business models because of easy money?
I think it's twofold. I think a lot of money prompts models that create opportunities for these drawing board business models to be created. I do think that that's the case. That's why you have vanity metrics driven business models that are perpetuated every bull cycle.
Correct.
I do think as well that it happens in markets or it happens in sectors where something really exciting is happening and we're just like, oh wow, retail digitization, that's amazing. Or in fintech, oh my gosh, like all these great things. But the core infrastructure in the back is not ready. Like for instance, in financial infrastructure, there's a lot of infra that is not yet built. In supply chains, a lot of the supply chain is not digitized. So once you combine a drawing board business model with a sector that is still nascent in its digital journey, you have the situation where the entirety of a business model is an impossibility from the get-go. And one of the major reasons why actually my journey to becoming a founder was accelerated is that I started to see this a lot. And in some cases, some of the business models that I observed were a direct kind of, punch in the guts for me because it was against what I truly believe needed to be the right way to approach.
I think I understand which ones you're talking about. I mean, I've heard quite a few businesses which are around this, removing the middlemen, and so far what they have successfully done is that they have successfully redistributed venture capital wealth amongst a lot of retailers, but didn't really go anywhere further than that because the retailers were very thankful for the wealth redistribution, but then not every voucher code is going to buy you a customer. It's not going to buy you loyalty, especially in these businesses. These are long established working relationships. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that point. Now, how are you helping these middlemen? What are you doing for them?
So one individual middleman, it's not that big. Let's say, our average customer does 3 to 5 billion per month in turnover, which again, it's sizable.
Yeah.
but they're bulk buyers and bulk breakers.
Yeah.
So one of them is not going to make a dent for a large manufacturer. The manufacturers, they know that they have thousands of these guys in their ecosystem anyway. But if you're able to orchestrate dozens, hundreds, thousands of these wholesalers, and you provide inventory visibility, you make them a little bit more efficient in how they manage that little warehouse or that little truck that they're owned. You give them opportunities to source adequately, but also connect to stores or connect to new revenue opportunities that they might not have had. All of a sudden, you've created cohorts of some of the best intermediaries in the country.
Okay.
And if you have something that can orchestrate thousands of the best intermediaries in the country, you've basically owned a very critical layer of the supply chain. So this is the value proposition for the upstream. And the reason why that's important is because nothing makes sense in the supply chain unless you're able to orchestrate and harmonize the ambitions of all the players. So if I'm able to orchestrate these guys and bring their visibility and make them really good intermediaries, I'm the friend of the brands. And this is the first big check mark that anybody needs to be able to say, that my business model is conducive for me to work with any brand principal and then provide value to my core customers, and at the same time be able to survive so I'm not blacklisted, I'm not pushed aside by, again, doing things that would go against the brand's interest. Now, what do I... go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. Just a very, very quick question. So would it be fair to assume that you're building this massive centralized ERP system?
It's ERP has a very bad connotation to it.
Okay.
But look, it's fine. It's actually not.
No, I'm just curious. I really don't know. I am not FMCG person. I don't know supply chain. So, and I think a lot of people don't, right?
Sure.
So the whole idea is to that, let's just simplify it. I want everyone to understand.
Sure.
Right. What are you doing and why you're doing it.
Right.
We'll come to the whys as well, but let's understand first what.
Sure. So what I do is I go to an intermediary and I help him sell more. I help him be a better product pusher.
Okay.
And how I do that is I connect him with better opportunities or more opportunities in the downstream. Basically, more retailers, more semi-wholesalers that are buying in bulk.
Sure.
At the same time, I help him source.
Okay.
I help him work with the ecosystem. And the only way that I do that is if I have very good inventory visibility into him.
Sure.
And I make sure that he has enough capital to be able to turn that inventory, buy and sell that inventory.
Interesting.
So that I connect him through APIs, through financing partners, into folks who are never been able to bank or finance this layer of the supply chain. Now they have access to all of these SMEs that can be maxing out the loan limit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because now you have the data. Correct. You know how much inventory they're holding or how much inventory they have been pushing out. So it's easier to lend them as well.
Correct. For the first time, they are underwritable.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, now it makes perfect sense. Now, the question is, have you already started doing this or you're building it?
It's already been going on since December.
Very nice. And how's been the overall feedback? Because I'm pretty sure it's going to be built over a period of time, right? Even me as an entrepreneur, there are a lot of things which I have in my head in terms of product roadmap. And then you figure out that, okay, the users want something else.
Sure.
And you try to just make sure that you're reaching in the right point. How's that journey going for you?
So, like I said, I've had the name of the company in my head for like many, many years. Right?
Good.
So it's been a really long process of figuring out dynamics and just thinking through. So when we started in December, the execution was really, really fast. We already had a team, right? So December was when we commercialized for the first time. And since December, things have moved really quickly. So we went from 0 to, close to 100 plus. We're crossing 100 this month now in terms of wholesalers on our platform.
Wow. Okay.
Wow. And with that came numbers, with that came funding, with that came a lot of things. But one thing that I wanted to highlight is that when we started, actually, if you talk to some of the investors that we pitched almost a year ago now, when we were first trying to raise money, but like around Q3 of last year, our narrative was very ERP-like. Actually, the first customers that we wanted to do testing with, it was much more of a tech first play. And then the customers slapped us in the face so hard. And they said, look, man, I don't need tech.
To be honest, when we started this conversation, even I felt that. Hence, I wanted, because I'm like, no, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. But when you simplify it, then you figure out that there are a lot of moving parts which come together.
All right.
Which come together to build this cycle of sorts, which you can easily visualize is missing.
Yeah.
Then it makes a lot more sense. But yeah, like, talk to me about these slappings which you got in terms of corrections from VCs.
Yeah, so it wasn't just the VC. So VCs at the beginning, I had the backing of some pretty important FMCG leaders, right? So FMCG consumer goods CEOs and whatnot. So they were like, maybe he's onto something. And we really were, because what we were building was something that the brands have always wanted to kind of do.
Correct.
But
at individual level, they wanted to do.
Correct.
Yeah.
But then again, that's also the reason why they're individual platforms. They tend to fail.
Yes.
Because they are a little bit biased and because they're not thinking about the customer's expectations so much. So a lot of my expectations about the world were formed on the back of all of this experience that I had. So when I first started, I started to have customer interviews and we went to do the first initial testings. It's almost like, oh, my blinders went off, right? And then I said, oh, wow, like actually there's so many assumptions and misconceptions that we brought to our initial product.
Sure.
And that's when we had to steer. We had to really think, okay, being a SaaS company is probably not going to work in Indonesia. Bringing technology as a core value prop is actually probably not going to work. So how do we get around those things? And how do we get our foot in the door with the customer and then over time show him the value of technology? Sure. That's exactly it. The only way to do it is you drive revenue, you make a friend, get him to trust you. And then over time, and this is something that I learned about the Indonesian culture as well, once you're in the circle, once they trust you, they are sometimes even irrationally willing to share a piece of the pie.
Correct.
I was never acutely aware of that until the point where that became the make or break for our business.
Sure.
And that's what we're ripping today. But look, the investors were also fundamental in the process. I think we got rejected by more than like 100 VCs. So
but that's a good start. That's an absolutely great start, I believe. I mean, just hypothetically, let's just imagine that, okay, the second or the third venture capital whom you met cut you out a check, for example.
Yeah.
Let's just take an assumption that here's $1 million or $500,000, go start building. You would have built something else altogether. Something which you probably would regret now with the experience which you have. So in the hindsight, I feel it was pretty good.
It was great.
It was great, right?
I'm also hard-headed.
Sure.
And let's say that I will learn by repetition. So when I was looking for a job, my first job, even though I had an offer on the table, I still was interviewing with 20, 30 different companies. I hadn't signed yet, so it was not on the end.
Yeah, sure.
Because I knew I wanted to be damn good at doing interviews, and that would serve me for the rest of my life. So when I was going through this kind of VC pitching exercise, sometimes I completely bombed it. It was like, like they would shut the meeting down within like 15 minutes.
Sure.
But that was so important for me, understanding the animal spirits, understanding how people praise businesses, the language, the things that make them tick. I think it served me super well. So I'm really glad I went through that. And I got a lot of data points about everything else. So
I'm sure.
Definitely a good start.
Okay, let's talk about fundraising, especially in this market. When did you raise your first money?
There's the perpetual raise, right?
Perpetual raise, okay.
Perpetual raise. So
that's what I've been hearing. But yeah, I agree as well. Okay.
So actually, the beginning for us was friends and family. So I've always been very focused on mentors and people that I've carried on my entire life as folks that I respect and that I follow. Actually, the AB InBev CEO is somebody that I had as a mentor since even before when I was like 16 or something like this.
True.
So for me, the big point that marked our fundraising journey. So I flew to New York. I think it was September of last year, and I went to see him, the former CEO of AB InBev, and I said, Carlos Brito, I want to get your money in. You've been mentoring me my entire life. I really want to. This would be important for me. So he put it was a very small check, but he put money in.
It's a validation.
It was a validation.
It's a validation.
And then a couple more folks started to put money in. Sure. And then, it started to be that thing, 50K, 100K here.
What's a trickle?
It was a trickle.
Oh, yeah.
And it trickled a couple $100,000, etc. Then I already had bombed 100 VCs. So now I was like, okay, let me continue with some VCs. Then December came around, revenue started to trickle in.
Yeah.
And then some of the VCs that we had been talking to that had kind of been a little bit dormant, they kind of propped up and they're like,
they're like, oh, you got revenue. Yeah. Let's talk. You got revenue. Let's talk.
Exactly. Product, you got revenue. Yeah. Oh, man. They didn't care about the funding that I already had or who the people were. They were like, oh, you got this is cool. And then January started to come around. They're like, actually, the traction is really good on this. And so between the end of December and the beginning of January, that's when we got our first VC and institution.
Who were they?
Forge.
Oh, nice. Okay.
They've been amazing.
So
nothing really, only amazing things to say. And, I always believed that what I needed was somebody, one institution to believe in me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was right. That was one of the biggest learnings for me during that time. The moment that they believed in me, and then I had advice, I had structure, I had a little bit more governance.
Sure.
And I had the validation now.
Sure.
It completely changed the game for us over the course of the next 6-7 months. Then we ended up raising another almost $5 million within basically 6 months.
Which is unheard of in this market, this macroeconomic. Okay. You mentioned something which I want to expand further upon is governance. Governance, which is something which wasn't heard of very frequently in the last few years. Especially in the startup space, but has become very prominent in the last year and a half. We hear it quite often. What do you think was missing earlier, which is now being pushed by the VCs, that even at pre-seed stage or seed stage, they want certain basics to be clearly out there, written, applied, executed.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on this in the first place? Because it's a very volatile environment, right? Most of the times in startups, things, there are constant experiments going on. You can't really follow the process every time. What are your thoughts on this?
So, during good times with excess cash available, it's only natural that they're going to want to deploy.
Correct.
Right. Incentives for VCs and for startups are aligned.
Sure.
Startups want money so they can pay things. Yes. They're going to need to expand and give it their moonshot. And VCs, they want to raise the next fund. They want the management fees. They want carry. They want all those things. They want to pass the hot potato. And that's the game that is played. And once that is there is this almost like moral hazard. We must, it's okay. It's okay. Not everything is there, but it's enough. Trust-based deals, partner-driven deals, all those things happen a lot. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a product of the times. And it will continue to happen. It's not the last time. The next time will continue to repeat itself. And then we're almost at the other extreme now where, the focus has shifted to hard assets, profitability, extreme levels of diligence for any deal that is made. And I think it's not just because that's the information that they need to make a decision. It's also the information that they need to be able to cover for the future because they have a few more deals that bomb. They need to basically have ticked all the boxes. And that type of diligence on the investor side it has unintended consequences.
How is it affecting you as a founder, or like in general? Let's not per se say you, but what are your thoughts in general? How is it affecting the founders? Like I'll give you one example.
Yeah.
Like for us at Kirtatik, we are about to close our pre-seed round, and when the audits were done. Well, there are audits happening for pre-seed round, guys. When the audit was done, and they came back with a few, thankfully, very few queries. That is because we are pre-revenue right now. They came back with a few queries, and the queries were very legal in nature, right? like the safe notes which you have signed already from your angels, it does not have this clause, or why this, why that. I'm like, okay, I mean, it's very small round. We are pre-revenue. I can't really even afford lawyers right now, to be honest. Lawyers are expensive.
Yeah.
Right? I can't really afford even that. But what I figured out is that if from the very beginning, we are able to keep our books clean, if we are able to keep our documents clean, it is going to serve us in the long run. For sure, I agree completely. But it is too much at this earlier stage, right? Now, you are at a slightly different stage. You are post-revenue. And you are actually having legal obligations to multiple parties, right? Brand side, retailer, a lot more, right? So governance probably for you is very different. But again, at the same time, it's very difficult at the very early stage, right? So what are your thoughts? How do you optimize it? How do you go about it?
I think one of the reasons why I clicked so well with investors in this climate is because my core, if I could pick one skill or one area that I've had a ton of experience in, and that has built an incredibly unique foundation, is on corporate finance and financial management.
Oh, you got it out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I used to basically manage M&A, right, for AB InBev at the time. I was a director in the team. So for me, it's always been natural, and I think about things in a structured manner. So even as I was approaching the conversations, I was coming in with all of this detail, right? All of this, very detailed data rooms, very detailed financials, I'm basically the CFO of the company as well.
Sure.
So that has opened a lot of doors. And then you marry that with the fact that I come from a school of what we call zero-based budgeting, which is a hallmark practice at 3G Capital. It is this practice of just being so brutal with expense management. And I think that gave investors a huge amount of comfort. So for me personally, it really was a tailwind. It was stressful, don't get me wrong, but I think I would have treated it the same way, even if it was good times.
Sure. No, I mean, yeah, for you, I think it's a very, very different story, because I believe it comes naturally to you. It comes very naturally to you. I mean, the governance or overall management, because that's how you're structured. But I'm speaking to a lot of early stage founders, especially first time founders. They are like all super lost.
Yeah.
Because they have never done this in the past. Plus, things are moving at such fast pace where you're like signing agreements, collecting capital. You really don't know. And I mean, you wait for it. You're like, okay, I'm going to put a structure to it. Let me come to a certain scale. Right? Because even putting things to a structure is a cost.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
And that has a psychological toll on a lot of folks.
I agree.
So as a founder, as I said, perhaps I have a little bit of a inclination towards that, but it definitely takes a toll on my team. Sure. I have to build the structures. I have to be in some ways corporate-like in some of the ways that I manage things. And people are like, hey, wait a second, we're a startup, right? So yeah, but so there are, again, unintended consequences even within the way that we run Baskit.
Sure.
But when I look at my peers, when I look at folks in the market today, 100%. And I've noticed, and I don't want to make this an absolute kind of statement, because I don't have enough data points, or there aren't enough data points for me to be able to say that it's for a fact definitively this. But I want to put it out there that I do believe that it has a stifling effect on innovation.
Okay.
For the simple reason that the types of startups and the types of decisions that we're making as founders today are coming from the perspective of restraint, and are coming from the perspective of we need to resource manage so carefully to show specific traction numbers, data points, etc. There is this whole power law concept, this whole, let's think completely blue sky, which, a couple of generational startups are put into that box. Not everyone and not every startup needs to be.
Correct.
It's much safer to be a startup being built in the time that we're building because of valuations. Sure, it's harder to come by money.
Totally agree on this one. Yeah.
But it's a much tighter shell.
Yeah.
But it's more difficult to create that generational kind of thing that is like, the thing just takes a life form of its own. Right? And I don't know yet how it's going to play out. I think the startups in our batch are going to be very good investments for the VCs. But the portfolio asymmetry that we used to see before, where one startup pays the entire fund back,
Correct.
I think that dynamic will change for our batch.
Correct. No, I absolutely agree. I mean, I'm a firm believer of the fact that if someone can build a sizable venture during this time frame of 2.5, 3 years, within this time frame, I think it's going to be an absolute success, because it's going to come from a point of restraint. It's going to come from a point of discipline. It's going to come from a point of sacrifice, a lot of it. So no, I absolutely agree. Let's talk about you being a bully in Indonesia, building not for Jakarta, building not for let's say a Bali or a Bandung, but for the real Indonesia, which is out there in tier 2, tier 3 cities. How is that going?
Yeah, it's a question I get asked most often.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Look, part of my character is I have always put myself in the deepest, most exposed situations I can to get cultural context, to get local context, to really stick my face out there and get slapped hard. And I've done that with every aspect of my life, moving from Europe to China, going on a limb from both quitting my job and, leaving the comfort of that corporate life, to moving to Singapore to be on an EP where in the middle of COVID, where if the probation hadn't worked out, I wouldn't have no way of staying in Asia.
Correct.
To then trying to, build my own company. So I've always tried to stick my head out there in a super major way. I visited I think 109 countries now. I just love that. And not all the countries where, some of them were in the middle of a war, right? So the reason why I'm saying that is the way that I approach my life experience in any scenarios, go deep into the actual thing, not manage my headquarters, but hey, we have operations in Cirebon, we have operations in Seoul. I'm going to go there and I want to be with the team. I'm going to figure it out. Even though my bahasa is not fantastic, I will be there. I will be in the trenches. They will feel like I'm with them. And in return, they will bless me with the ability to actually do something that is helpful to them, and that we are working in sync to build something useful. And I think that the key to success in building a business where you're building for such a diverse geography, cultural landscape, is not so much whether you are a local of that country, but rather, do you have the appetite to go down the rabbit hole and stick your head out there? Because even if you're from Jakarta, I mean, how many people are willing to go out to the field on a weekly basis?
I mean, I 100% agree to you. My argument has been, the argument which I've given to quite a few folks is that if it was only about you being a local or not, then all local startups would have been a hit. All local startups would have worked out, right? And I'm not only talking about Indonesia, right? And I'm talking about in general. You see a lot of migrant founders in, let's say, US right now, right? And vice versa. There are a lot of American founders who are building in other countries. But there is this thing which comes with which comes with being in a foreign land, and especially when you're building for the roots.
Yes.
Right. And you are out there. You're simply out there. You're just above the roots, right? Okay, interesting. How big is the team now?
We are in the 30s, so I think we're about 35 as of this week.
What are your hiring philosophies? What are the 3 major checkpoints which you have when you're hiring people?
As in, what I want to hire for, or
no, whenever you're hiring, for example, if let's say I am the one who's interviewing for any role, what are the 3 attributes which you generally look at when you're hiring folks?
So, at 3G Capital, the spirit there, I don't know if you know much about the companies, ABMF, Kraft Heinz, Burger King, etc. People literally wear the company's t-shirt like to bed. I think they shower with it. I think they wear it under their ski.
Deeply embedded in them.
It's crazy.
Okay.
I mean, just the amount of culture and ownership. So every time I interview somebody, one of the main things that I want to understand is not whether they are already the same cultural alignment as Baskit, because that may take some time. It may take an alignment of worldviews and whatnot. But whether they have displayed that passion and have displayed the ability to be so aligned with the company before. If they have, and of course there are a couple of parameters that are met, that I feel confident that I'm able to entice passion and I'm able to drive this person beyond monetary, beyond your traditional, offer letter driven thing. So I like to tease out for passion. I like to tease out for that whatever's creating that ambition that goes far beyond just the monetary rewards. So culture I'll test out extensively. The other thing that for me is extremely important is flexibility. Okay. So flexibility comes with, it's not just how experienced you are. Oh, let's say you've got 20 years experience. That's great. But are you comfortable enough with us abandoning this business model tomorrow and then just changing entirely? And then you also having to forget what you had to do for 20 years, because now it's no longer about your experience, but it's about, let's think about a new problem together.
Sure.
That mental quickness and that flexibility to actually embark in that difficult thinking journey with me. So I know it's silly, but I'll sometimes throw in a few teasers or go down this complete rabbit hole with a person, asking like many different layers of why and how about this. So I like to engage brainstorming.
Sure.
So that's something that for me, if I can tease out, makes a huge difference.
Okay.
And I like to see the last one. I think it's connected, right? But one of the things that I do, and I think I'm a little bit, I don't know if it's already caught on, but I like to book my interviews in slightly inconvenient times.
Okay, there's an old one. There's an old one. Okay, but there's an old one. It works.
It works.
It works. It works.
It works. And what it tells you, it tells, is this person willing to? Does this matter enough to the person?
Correct. This works especially for senior hires, is what I've seen in my experience. For junior hires, I mean, to be honest, most of the times they are willing to accommodate because they really, really need that role. But for senior hires, it actually does show a lot of inquisitiveness and commitment, as well as the interest in the role itself. Okay, interesting. Let's talk about the culture part. You are now a year old as a company.
Yeah, about a year old.
So when you start, the culture is you and probably you have co-founders.
So the story of Baskit is when I was in the process of transitioning to not to use that the other word. Basically, my wife Yun Jung was the one who established the company, who got the first few things rolling.
Sure.
So she was first founder. I was not even an employee at the time.
Okay.
So I just started out. Then I was finally able to wrap up my prior job. Then I came on board, and for a while we ran the company as co-founders, which for me has always been an amazing thing because Yun Jong and I, my wife, we started out as colleagues. We got married, then started a business together, and that's been,
So it's two of you.
Just two of us.
Okay, we will come to this one. Let me the culture part.
Okay.
This one's interesting. I'm gonna cut this for the trailer as well.
Okay.
Look out. Okay. So the culture is you, your co-founder, a few early employees. So the way you behave is what sets out the tone of the culture, right? Of course, you can have an idea of it, that I would want Baskit's culture to be like this. I personally feel culture is the most abused term in startups, massively abused, which in sense is used to literally abuse employees at times, deny them of basic rights as well. But I mean, that's a different conversation. But how does this early stage venture go about establishing a culture?
So everything comes down to at least the first grade filter.
Okay.
So if you don't filter properly, you cannot, you don't know what's coming into the little bus.
Sure.
So I still get involved in every interview, everything. No matter who, I need to speak to the person.
Likewise.
And that's extremely important.
Yeah.
You need to set the tone.
Yeah.
What that does as well is that it gives you, that's a separate benefit of it. It makes you very good at appraising people, especially as a foreign founder, right? But anyway, so the filtering, getting the right people in is extremely important. The second thing is, and we see this, you bring such a diverse set of people in that especially the slightly more senior hires, they come with their own ability to influence some of their own biases. So even if I try to impose whatever I believe is the right culture, if I was doing that purely from the perspective of a top-down, I would be being intellectually dishonest with how a company's culture is actually formed.
Correct.
If I tried to say, here are 5 values, everybody please shove it down your throats, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Nobody would want to work at the company, first of all. And second of all, then that's not really culture. It's a set of guidelines so that I can push and pull employees in different ways. So, and to be honest, we're still in that phase where I've explained my vision. I've explained what I believe are the right ways and how we should be doing. But it's incredible to see how a couple of the leadership teams, they are helping to influence the culture in their own way. And I wouldn't say that our culture is still fully formed yet. I would say we are taking baby steps towards bringing this amalgamation of what the co-founders plus some of the early leaders, especially the ones who have been with us since the beginning, were able to break. So I guess to summarize it is, I don't think it would be right to say this is our startup's culture in the first year.
Thank you for saying this. Because, I mean, this is exactly my contention, that you cannot, the culture cannot be defined in the first, not even first, I would say first few years. It takes time, hence it's culture, right? Because it has evolved over a period of time and it is unique. It is unique to your own startup, right? And it is not set in stone. It might evolve. Evolve for better, of course. Hopefully, evolve for better. Okay, let's come to the interesting piece. How's it working with your wife?
For me, it's amazing.
Okay.
As I was mentioning before, we were colleagues before we got married.
Sure.
So we always came from this perspective of understanding boundaries, knowing how to separate the professional and then the personal.
Mm-hmm.
And my character, my most important characteristic, I would say, is that I go all in into everything that I do, especially the thing that I'm most driven about. Today it happens to be the startup, at least intellectually, for
sure.
Intellectual stimulation.
What do you think is her main characteristic?
Sorry?
What do you think your main characteristic is that you go all in?
Sure.
What is her main characteristic?
Yeah, so she's a little bit different, quite different from me in terms of how she is as an individual. She's more like a support system.
Okay.
So for us, the way that our interactions started is I've always been telling her, hey, I really like this thing. I really want to do. And she has always provided support. She's always said, we should do it. This will be great. Let's go. So she's always been a catalyst. To be honest, I don't think I would have been able to actually get this off the ground if she hadn't catalyzed me. So she's a support system and I'm the freight train, right? Just driving. And that is a very important thing because sure, we are enthralled and interested in the same things. So we both have a lot to talk about all the time.
Sure.
Beyond all the personal stuff. Sure. She understands my life, I understand her life. We're building something together. And we don't have kind of competing, conflictual roles or responsibilities. She takes care of HR and a lot of the culture building, internal building, etc. And I don't know if culture building is a word that you like. But
No, I absolutely love culture building. I love culture building. I'm not comfortable with someone saying that this is my culture.
Sure.
It is not your culture today. First year, you cannot have a culture.
And I do the other things. I do the fundraising. I do the strategizing on the commercial side.
Sure.
I do the financial side. So different skill sets, complementary personalities, and I get to spend a lot of time with her. And I love that.
No, it all sounds very lovely to me. How did it sound to the venture capitals?
I don't care.
You don't care, but did they?
Then I don't want to work.
Did they care? I mean, did you have these rough conversations with some?
It happened.
You did, right?
It happened. So look, there have been not direct feedback. So what I find is that people always in your face will say, I love it. Oh yeah, and we back, husband, wife, founder. Yeah. What they don't tell you is that oh crap, like that was a complete blow up. So what I do here through others.
There's more like the sustainability concept which keeps going on. We are all for sustainability, and then you see the portfolio, there's no one out there sustainability.
That's exactly it, right?
Yeah, no, but I mean, okay, let's make it fun. Tell me about the most weird conversation which you've had with a venture capital without taking name on this part. Which in hindsight is funny to you, let's say, for example.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I was talking to an investor, and I could tell that he was impressed. He was like, "Oh, he was really engaging and everything." I already had some rapport with the investor, so I think maybe they weren't 100% sure how exactly they were very open. So it was like a back and forth. So once we touched on this point, it's almost like I saw this person's facial expressions completely change. And then that person went into a rant and he was basically reminiscing on this recent board meeting that he had where it was just a complete disaster between husband and wife. Literally, I had a 45-minute call, and the 30 minutes of the call was basically talking about the fallout of that company and the fallout of what happened there. And then I was just like,
he's basically hinting you.
I was just like, thank you for the feedback.
I get you.
I got the point. So for me, that was hilarious. But it also gave me a very kind of, unconventional insight into how the market might see it.
Sure. I mean, it is stupid to some extent, but at the same time, I believe they want to be very careful with their bets.
Sure.
So I would just give some bit of a leeway out there. But I think it's all right, man. I mean, there have been multiple businesses which have been. Look at Microsoft. I mean, Melinda wasn't really the co-founder, but she's absolutely the one who's heavily responsible for what Microsoft does today.
They have so many Y Combinator.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, but unfiltered opinion on the matter, yeah. And I don't mind sharing. I think would having a married couple managing a company increase the likelihood of one of the co-founders exiting the company? 100%. 100%. I have zero doubt about that. Not just because of fallout. Sure, fallout is something that could happen. But in some cases, at least I believe in my case, actually, this is something that brings us even closer. So the fallout is not what I would be worried about. But I do think that startup people also want to have families.
Correct.
Startup people want to have babies.
Absolutely.
Sometimes having all eggs in a single basket doesn't work for everybody.
True.
So I do believe that there is a point there, and I do understand why some investors, even though they have a roundabout way of feeling about this, and the visible layer is not what was actually happening in the background, I do think that there is a point.
Did anyone suggest you to add one more co-founder?
We actually had a local co-founder at the very beginning, but only lasted a few months.
Sure.
We were in the experimentation phase, and
do VCs push you to have one more founder?
Not anymore. Now it's kind of like, all right,
just you got revenue, bro. You've got revenue.
But look, in our founding team, I had a very honest and a very upfront conversation with Yann, and we actually came to the decision that because we also want to have a family eventually, we consolidated the co-foundership under me. I think our time horizon for having a family is 2 years or so.
Sure.
And we came to that agreement in peace. The investors were very supportive, There was no noise, and now here we are.
Beautiful. I really, really, really appreciate your honesty throughout this chat. Now, let's do this this final bit. So we have a segment in the show, which is basically an elevator pitch.
Okay.
Right? So you've got like 60 seconds to pitch me Baskit, although I don't have any money. But yeah, I mean, you get blessings and goodwill.
Sounds good.
And a trailer.
There we go.
And a trailer. So, yeah, here we are on the pitch.
Okay. So what if I told you that the equivalent of more than 50% of Indonesia's GDP in terms of data, in terms of flow of products, is completely offline today? Meaning that there is no way you can touch that data. There's no way you can monetize that data. There's no way you can use it for productive use. That's the current situation with Indonesia's supply chains. Anywhere from $2 to $500 billion is actually locked up in various supply chains that are powered by intermediaries that are today operating offline. They don't have a partner to support them. They don't have systems, yet they're so crucial to Indonesia's economy, to manufacturers, to basically the entire industrial services logistics industry. So if I told you that there is a way to bring these intermediaries onto a platform, bring inventory visibility, bring data in a way that we can power that economic activity, that we can make and crystallize value from it. Actually, I want to redo that one. Is that okay?
You can.
I don't like this one.
I mean, I actually went somewhere in my mind while you were pitching. So yeah, I think
it's okay. I actually didn't think through this one very much. Let me think about that for a second.
No.
Is it okay if I take?
Of course you can.
Okay.
You can. You lost me at crystallized.
Yeah, I actually didn't think this one through.
No. Look, that's the whole point, right? Because I mean, if you ask me to put it out, I actually go on a rant.
Yeah.
Myself. Although I've been doing this as a theme.
Sure.
This is probably the 11th podcast which we are recording, but even I go on a rant. So it's completely all right. Just put in a structure. You got 60 seconds.
Sure. Let me just think through the structure and then I'll deliver it. I structured thoughts. So. And should it be kind of like capital or like I would for a VC or?
Yeah, it's for a VC. It's for a VC. You bumped into a VC.
Oh.
In an elevator.
Oh, I see.
It's an elevator pitch. 60 seconds elevator.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
Understood. Okay.
Or you want to completely chop off this segment? We can do that.
I think it's good. Just that I'm trying to structure it in a way.
Sure.
I always go on rants as well.
Yeah, I mean, I believe most founders have this problem, including me, because we marinate and think so much about the business which we are building. There are so many thoughts, and they're all convoluted at times. And you just go on and on and on and on about it without, specifically when there is no agenda, right? So whenever we are asked to do it in a very concise, very short manner, because we haven't thought about it in a short way, it's always been a large mission of sorts, and it gets very tricky.
Yeah, it does. It's okay. We can give it another go.
Okay.
So Baskit is an offline commerce infrastructure enabler for Indonesia, meaning that we support offline middlemen, folks that don't have access to technology, pen and paper users who manage their products, their services, their warehouse in a fully manual way. There are about 200,000 of these intermediaries across Indonesia, powering more than $200 billion worth of flows on a yearly basis. Now, these intermediaries are extremely crucial to the Indonesian economy. God, I actually really hate this. I really hate this one. I really hate this one.
I'm not editing a single bit of this. We're gonna keep this.
I hate it. I hate it.
We're gonna keep this. No worries.
No. Let's
No worries. Let's end this on one note, which I want from your side. There are a lot of founders right now who are struggling. Be it with their fundraise or who are struggling with finding their PMF, who are struggling because their pre-seed investors are pulling out now. They don't want to participate further. What would you want to tell them? Your thoughts?
I would say the dominant characteristic of the founder of this generation, this tough time, will be resilience. And to be honest, that's what people will say about us when all the smoke, comes down. The resilient founder of this time will have been the successful founder. So there's no go getting through this without just having to be an absolute cold-hearted killer with resilience in a way that I don't think founders have had to face over the course of the past few years. So first of all is, don't give up. People say that all the time.
Yeah.
But even the time that you're spending today fundraising, the rejections and whatnot, it's not wasted time.
Sure.
It is really, really not wasted time. There is data to be gathered, there are learnings, and it's amazing to see what a relationship that is built during an investor conversation does for you 6 months down the line when a few parameters change within the business. So again, I would continue to engage, stick your head out there. Eventually things will come. With regards to PMF and traction and what is required to fundraise these days, I think that it's becoming clearer and clearer what the blueprint is for those expectations.
Yeah.
So play the game. If playing the game is what is required to get things off the ground for now.
I think it was always required, playing the game, but it's just that the rules of the game have changed.
That's what I'm saying. So if we know the rules of the game now, then play the rules of that game. Because if, I started out a little bit as a purist and I was like, no, I'm going to think about it this way, right? But you're getting very direct feedback. If that feedback has been given to you and what is required is visible, it doesn't hurt to actually do a little bit of that so that you can cross that initial chasm, that initial hurdle.
Sure.
So what I would say is, don't spend as much time being a purist like I was. Try a little bit to play ball with the investors that are interested, even if it means that you will need to adjust how you think about your pitches, how even you think about displaying metrics, or even getting some of those metrics generated in the first place.
Good ones. Thank you so much, man. Good chatting. Apart from the bloopers which I've got for your 1 minute pitch, I think it was pretty flawless. Great insights.
Yeah.
I think I rubbed you off in the beginning with my knowledge of supply chain, but I believe even now I am got on a clear idea of what you're doing, and more importantly, why you're doing. It's very clear. I believe for our audience also, it's very clear of what Baskit intends to achieve. I wish you and the team loads of luck. I'm sure you guys are going to do amazing. Thank you so much for joining.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.